Welcome back to another video about how to heal adoption and narcissistic abuse. If you're new to my channel, my name is Theodora. I work as a spiritual and psychological counselor, and I am an adoptee myself. In today's video, I wanna talk about some of the challenges that many adopted people can experience when they go no contact with their narcissistic adoptive family. It's especially the challenges that a lot of people they experience after they went no contact with the family. A lot of adopted people that I have worked with, they have experienced that after they went no contact with their family and they had been dealing with all the enablers, flying monkeys, and then when things settled a little bit, they hit this low point where they just felt like they were falling into a hole, and then they just got stuck there and they had no idea how to get up again. And they had no idea how to change it and to change the situation. And they felt very, very powerless in this state. And they were surprised because they thought that as long as they kept no contact with their abusive adoptive family, then things would naturally get better. And things also get better, but there is an internal work that's waiting for each and one of us the moment we go no contact with our dysfunctional narcissistic adoptive family. And that internal work requires, first of all, that we become aware of the work that's waiting for us. Not that we can become aware of all of it, because a lot of it is installed in our subconscious mind. A lot of these coping mechanisms, protective strategies, and we develop them very early in our life in these dysfunctional families. And we develop these mechanisms to survive, to cope with the abuse in these narcissistic adoptive families. First of all, we need to become aware what it is that we need to uninstall again from our internal system. Then we also need to commit to do the work. We need to allow ourselves to feel all our emotions. We need to grieve the loss of the family that we never had and that we're never going to have in the future. And one of the other reasons that we can get easily stuck here is because to go no contact with your narcissistic adoptive family is a huge decision. It's a very difficult decision. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, this is the last option that you are probably choosing. You have probably tried everything else. I believe that 100%. We're not doing this by free will. When we are faced with going no contact with our narcissistic adoptive family, we are also choosing to go against our biggest fear, which is to not please the narcissistic adoptive family. It's to not give them what they want. It's to not fulfill their needs. And we can easily imagine that they are gonna get very, very upset, very angry. They might explode when they realize that we have went no contact with them. And this can trigger so much fear in us. It can trigger so much fear because we were controlled by fear. We were disempowered, and then we were controlled by fear. Our narcissistic adoptive family controlled us by fear. Therefore, after we go no contact with them, we can actually get more scared, more afraid, and that can paralyze us to some degree. It can make us unable to choose to make decisions, to commit to something, and to act upon these commitments and decisions. And that can create this huge stuckness where we don't know which way to go. We don't know how to get out of that state. And another reason why it can be very difficult to make it to the other side is because we're not used to the other side, which is actually the normal, is the reality that most people live in. We're not being abused. But for adopted people who grew up in narcissistic adoptive families, the normal for them was to be abused. It was to live in this dysfunctional family. It was to constantly be exposed to punishment, threats, manipulation, distorted reality, gaslighting, projection, rejection, and so many things. That was their normal up until this decision day. So the life that's waiting on the other side looks very different. And that can be scary because the systems that you have developed to survive in the narcissistic adoptive family, they don't work on the other side. They don't work in the other reality, in the real reality. They don't work there. They're useless. Because in the real reality, not everyone is going to abuse you, and not everyone is narcissistic. There are good people over here. There are generally caring, loving people over here. And we need to understand that. We need to find the strength to allow ourselves to broaden our perspective and trust that they are not all narcissistic on the other side. There are good people here. There are good people that's waiting for you. And that's why it can feel uncomfortable in the beginning. It can feel so uncomfortable to make it to the other side. And also because who can you trust over here? Who can you trust? Because you don't even trust yourself at this stage. Maybe the only trust you have within yourself is that it was the best decision to go no contact with your family, because you were faced with the existential choice of choosing your mental health or stay in the abusive family. So you need, first of all, at this stage on the other side, you need to learn to trust yourself again, because otherwise you won't be able to trust anyone over here that wants to treat you good, that wants to give you love, unconditional love, not the fake love that you experienced in your adoptive family, not the painful love, not the illusionary love, real, unconditional love. You need to trust yourself enough, learn how to trust yourself enough, because then you will be able to interact with people in a more healthy way. You need to imagine that when you make it to the other side, all your behavioral skills, coping mechanisms, protective strategies, surviving skills, they are not going to be healthy when you try to create new connections with people. You need to replace all these unhealthy survival mechanisms with some new ones that are way more healthy and organic and natural, that comes from your authenticity. And this leads me to the second issue, which is, as long as we don't trust ourselves, we are not able to develop healthy boundaries that is way more natural to have on the other side and to practice than it was in your narcissistic adoptive family. Because in the narcissistic adoptive family, that dynamic was based on not having boundaries. No one was allowed to have boundaries except the narcissistic person, perhaps. But none of the family members were allowed to have boundaries here. So you naturally didn't learn to develop that. But it doesn't mean that you don't still have boundaries within you, because boundaries is a bodily experience. It's something that we first feel in our body. When someone is crossing your boundary, you will first notice it in your physical body, and then you will register it in your mind, and then you will see, and then you will think, oh, okay, this person actually overstepped my boundary. But you learn to dismiss that every single time your narcissistic adoptive parent overstepped your boundaries. You learn to deny, suppress that they are actually overstepping your boundaries here. So this means that when you make it to the other side, you need to reopen your center of boundaries within your physical body. You need to open that center and reconnect with your physical sensations where your boundaries will be expressed. This can be difficult because the more traumatized you have become, the more trauma you were exposed to in your childhood, the more you will feel repelled by the physical sensations that's reoccurring within your body, because all the unhealed trauma will be reoccurring, recircling within your physical body, and that can be extremely uncomfortable, which makes many adopted people tend to try to escape from those feelings and those sensations in the body. And a lot of the ways that adoptees, they try to escape it is by drinking a lot, maybe taking drugs, maybe having sex with a lot of people, maybe working a lot. I know that is one of my issues, that I work a lot. Not to not feel myself, but because I don't feel like I would be good enough if I was not doing anything, if I was just sitting here being me, shutting the camera off. I wouldn't feel like I was good enough just by being me. So this is something that is very important to investigate within yourself. It can also be smoking, for example. I talked about that in a very old video, that I also used to smoke because I felt like if I was choosing to smoke, I didn't care if it would kill me, because I felt like I didn't matter enough anyway if I wasn't here suddenly. So this is just an example of how deep some of these coping mechanisms are, some of these escape mechanisms that we tend to do without we even aware of it. It took me so many years to realize why I couldn't stop smoking. It took me so many years, you have no idea. And the last thing that I see as a very long-term consequences of narcissistic adoptive parents abuse is that even decades later, after the adoptees have ended the contact with the family, they can find themselves still feeling stuck, like they still can't create any movement, like they can't get out of their stuckness. And at this stage, when they have tried to work it out for decades, one of the biggest challenges that they are still fighting against within themselves is the chronic shame. I've talked about this before because chronic shame is something I have seen in all the adoptees that I've worked with. It is penetrating their whole belief system about themselves. It is penetrating all their thoughts about themselves. It is penetrating all their sensations about how they should feel inside, how they should feel about themselves. And this is a very, very difficult consequence to dissolve, because chronic shame really operates in our subconscious mind, because it was installed very early in life. It was installed throughout a longer period. And in order to survive being shamed by your narcissistic adoptive parents throughout your childhood, through decades maybe, you end up creating a totally new personality, a double personality that is the shame. It's actually the chronic shame that continues to abuse you. So you can see it like this. You can imagine that you have an angel on one shoulder and then you have a devil on the other shoulder. The angel is your authentic self. It's your, where you know what's right and wrong, and you know that you are worth it, and that you are good enough, and that you are lovable, right? That voice might be very, very quiet at this moment. Then you have the devil on the other shoulder, and the devil is the second personality that you have had to develop in order to survive. And that devil is constantly fighting the angel that's sitting here. When the angel is trying to cheer you up, root for you when you want something, if you say, I'm gonna take this course because I wanna learn how to paint because that would make me happy, but then the devil will be like, oh no, who do you think you are? You don't deserve it. You will never be a good painter. You're not worth it anyway, so don't waste your money on that. And you have probably experienced this in your own life, where you feel like you get an idea and then immediately there were like these thoughts, they're like shooting them down, like they were not even allowed to be thought in the first place. This is the chronic shame that's constantly continuing to sabotage your life. It's actually a part of you that's doing this, because this was the only way you could survive while you were in the narcissistic adoptive family. But when you are not living there anymore, when you live your own life, when you're not in contact with them, or even if you were still in contact with them, you don't need to continue to sabotage your life, because you needed that to survive in the family. But now when you're not in the family, you don't need it anymore. That is a very, very important area to dissolve. It's a very important traumatic response to dissolve. And it can take very long time. I remember that it took me a very long time, and it was very intense, the work that I had to do. But it is not impossible. It is very possible to dissolve it. It's almost like when you think about, you were being mind-fucked in order to develop this chronic shame personality. In order to dissolve it and replace it with your authentic self, you actually need to mindfuck the chronic shame personality with the angel. The angel needs to mindfuck the devil. That's where you are standing right now. That's how you're going to dissolve the devil. You need to let the angel mindfuck it. And I know it can seem very easy for me to just sit and talk about all this stuff like, oh, I went through it, I'm fine, I'm not struggling with anything in my life anymore. But that's not the reality. I still struggle. I still have my internal battles. I still struggle with trusting people. I still have to really, really ask myself what it is that I'm experiencing. If it's my traumatic brain that's trying to imagine things that are not there, or is it the real reality that I'm perceiving? Because it can be so difficult to make it to the other side. So I just really want you to be gentle with yourself. Give the love that you never received. Give that to yourself, because you have it all within you. Give that to yourself. And if that is difficult, you can also try to write a letter to yourself. That can be very, very therapeutic as well, and healing. I really hope that my videos are making any difference. I really hope that you feel like they are supporting you and they are validating your pain and your experiences, because that's all I want. That is my biggest wish, that you find the inspiration and you find the strength to continue working towards the life that you dream of, because you deserve it more than anyone. And you don't have to live in this suffering for the rest of your life. You don't have to. That's all I have for you right now. I would love to hear comments about how this is resonating for you, and it would be such a huge help if you would send it to another adoptee who are struggling, maybe who just went no contact with their adoptive parents. Send the video to them. We never know how many people are actually struggling, because so many people are struggling in silence. I will be back very soon with a new video. Bye for now.